Hi. So once again, if you watched the previous video, I showed you how to use the transfer paper. There you can see the image. Okay, so here on top I've cut out a stencil. You can see on the back here where I've cut out the darkest areas. That's all I've cut out at the moment. You can see here on my reference, this is the dark area here. This one is this dark area just here. There's a finger here, but it's not completely dark. It's just this little slice here, and then of course the eye and these little fringy bits here are some shadows, which it is slightly lighter around this edge here. And you can see these, which are actually the shadows cast from the eyelashes from above. So this is my reference image. I've made one or two. I might even do a third stencil. And one thing that's very important when you make the photocopies of these, don't use JPEGs, because JPEGs are what they call loosey. Every time you save them or you do something, they lose a little bit of quality, they lose a bit of detail. That can also mean that they don't stay exactly the same size. So it's very important to use PNG files or TIFF files. They keep the data. All these copies that I've made are exactly the same. I have another stencil, and as you can see on this one, I've cut out the eyelashes and I've cut out where the finger is. Now the reason I did this one with the finger, because it's quite dark, I wanted to protect the rest of the nose when I'm going in there and spraying it, and also be able to spray freely from side to side, because it's slightly lighter up here than it is down here, and things like that. But I protected the nail, I left the nail in. Once I've got these lines down, of course I can use those as reference as to where I put this stencil that I've cut out over the top. I've also cut this the same size as the board, which is also an indicator. It doesn't have to be 100%. You can see some of the, maybe you can't see, but some of the lines are not exactly the same. It doesn't really matter. This is Etac EFX, and this is a carbon black, and I'm using it for this darkest area 100% straight from the bottle. But when I come to actually paint it, I've already mixed in this bottle here 1 part paint to 5 parts transparent base, which is called reduce air, and that would be the best to reduce it down with, or you can reduce it down with water. And this is just to stop the stencil from lifting up when you're spraying and getting underneath. I've already preloaded my airbrush. I'm using my Olympus, this is the MP200C, which has a 0.23 needle in it. And I've also got my brush here, which has got magnets on the back, which is stuck to my board. And I use that to go in and clean off any tip dry that builds up. I spray it onto here. Now I'm using here, I've got my air pressure regulator on my quick release, so I've got my compressor set at 25 psi, and then I just use this to go slightly up and down. It makes it easier. Then if I want to clean the brush out, I can just turn this round really quickly and it gets a much more air pressure. Like I like to work at it at a lower air pressure, which this is equivalent to probably about 10 to 15 psi. My mask. I'm going to just go in with this paint into this darkest areas. Another thing is to move around when you're doing this. Don't just fill this in block. Move to another part and allow this time to dry a little bit, because you could get problems with having too much paint build up. And I'm also pointing it in this direction so that it goes away from these little fringes here. Perhaps I'll zoom in a little bit more here. So you can see these little fringes here, and because they're loose, if I go from underneath, then I'm not going to get the paint coming underneath. If it does, it doesn't matter, because I can go in with an eraser after this and clean it up a little bit. But if you don't need to, the better. I'm just building this up in layers. So if you use this brush, by the way, and I've got airbrush cleaner on this, you'll get some paint, you'll get some liquid on this area, and you want to make sure you blow that off, because otherwise you'll get spots blowing onto your painting, and you definitely don't want that. Now also you can see that I'm holding the airbrush at quite a distance, and I can do that because I've got it all covered. That's the whole point of this stencil, is to protect the rest from the overspray. And when you're doing something as dark as this, you will get a lot of overspray. I can now very carefully take this off. Now with these little magnet things I made, to take those off, it's better just to use the magnet. Now be careful when you take this off, you do not want to smudge it. So as you can see, this has got the darkest layers covered that were on here. It's not hitting the lines bang on, that doesn't matter. I can take this line out. But you need to do these adjustments straight away, because once you start painting with reduced down paint and you start getting overspray on it, if you go in with your eraser, it can actually be very difficult to blend this in, because remember, these are, the whole point of this is you use one colour and you go over and over it. If you go in too dark too quickly, you can't correct it. It's as simple as that. So you have to start with very, very light layers and you build it up slowly, and you want to just get rid of these darker lines. You don't need those, and you don't want those showing through. And once the paint gets over the top of this, you'll find it very difficult to rub them out. Hope this has helped. See you in the next one.